Welcome to Betrayal Stories. In today's video, I want you to settle in, take a deep breath, and let your mind open not to danger, not to scandal, but to something far quieter and far more powerful, the kind of emotional truth we often avoid until life brings it straight to our door. What I'm about to share is not a story of forbidden boundaries or dramatic confessions. It is a story about rediscovery, about family, about two people who spent years believing they understood one another, only to realize they had barely begun to see past the surface. Today's story is one of quiet healing, unexpected connection, and the way honesty can transform the spaces between us. It had been nearly half a year since I last saw my nephew. Jason, 6 months doesn't seem long when you say it aloud. But in the heart, time works differently. It stretches in strange ways, expanding the distance between people even when memories remain close. Jason had grown up more quickly than any of us expected, finishing graduate school, carving a life for himself, then suddenly reappearing in our small town as though drawn back by some invisible thread. His mother, my sister, Ellen, had been the one gently nudging me to visit. She always had a way of encouraging people toward the things she believed mattered most. You should go see him, she had insisted over the phone one quiet Sunday morning. He misses you more than he'll ever admit. And he's changed, Mary. He really has. You'll see. I remember smiling at the way she said it because she sounded both hopeful and proud. Jason had always been special to her, and in many ways, to me as well. Not because he was perfect, not even close, but because he carried a kind of quiet resilience that made you root for him. So that following Saturday, I did what I always did when visiting someone who mattered to me. I baked my lemon loaf. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it was my signature, my little offering of patience and care. The kind of thing you share when words feel too heavy or too small. The drive across town was peaceful. Autumn had begun its slow transformation, brushing gold across the treetops. Leaves tumbled lazily in the breeze, catching sunlight like tiny flames. The air was cool, crisp enough to remind you that change was coming, but gentle enough to make you savor every breath. Jason's new apartment building was modest but charming, tucked between a bookstore and a cafe that smelled perpetually of roasted beans and cinnamon. As I climbed the stairs, I felt a flutter in my chest, not nervousness, just anticipation. The curiosity of seeing someone you love after time has reshaped them. He opened the door before I could knock. There he stood, taller, more grounded, carrying that same crooked grin he'd had since childhood. But behind it now was something new. Not distance, exactly, but depth, experience, a quietness that comes from growing through life instead of just moving through it. Aunt Mary, he said, pulling me into a hug that was warm and steady. You look incredible. I laughed lightly. You always say that when you want something. Maybe I just mean it, he replied with a shrug. And I noticed for the first time how strongly he resembled his father. The same gray-green eyes, the same thoughtful posture, as though he were constantly holding back a question or a memory. His apartment smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, with books stacked in neat rows across the walls. He'd always been a reader, but this was a new level of dedication. Shelves arranged by theme, small notes tucked between pages, stack of journals by the window. We sat down and I poured the coffee I brought from the bakery on Main Street. The mugs warmed our palms and we slipped into conversation like easing into a familiar melody. We talked about work, about my garden, about his new position at the university. It felt natural, flowing, unforced until it didn't. Somewhere between a shared laugh and a lingering silence, I realized he was observing me more closely than usual. Not studying, not scrutinizing, simply trying to understand. And that made me feel unexpectedly exposed. You ever think about how time sneaks up on you? He asked suddenly, his tone soft. One day you're running barefoot in someone's backyard, and the next thing you know, you're the one offering advice and pretending you've got it all figured out. That's adulthood, I said. Most of us are just improvising. He smiled but didn't look away. Do you ever regret not having kids of your own? The question caught me in the center of my chest not because it was inappropriate, but because it was true, honest, raw, and hearing it from him, someone who had been, in many ways, like a son I never had, was strangely emotional. I used to, I admitted. Sometimes I still do. But life took a different path for me. And besides, I've had plenty of people to care for. Your mother, you. He didn't respond at first. Instead, he reached out, gently placing his hand over mine. His touch wasn't lingering or suggestive, it was grounding. A simple, sincere gesture of connection. A way of saying, I hear you. His thumb brushed lightly once over my knuckles before he withdrew. Sorry, he murmured. I didn't mean to make things heavy. I've always admired the way you understand people. Like you see straight through their excuses and into their truth. That comes with time, I said, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. People still surprised me. Jason surprised me, and in that moment, sitting across from him while the soft afternoon light slanted through the window, I felt something stir inside me. Not desire, not longing, simply recognition to humans, seeing one another clearly. Without the usual roles and masks, as the kettle whistled faintly from the kitchen, I stood to refill our cups. My hands trembled slightly more from emotion than from age. When I turned back, Jason was still watching me, his expression thoughtful. For the first time in a long time, I wondered what kinds of conversations we might have in the future conversations. We never allowed ourselves before. The afternoon unfolded slowly after that, suspended in a kind of quiet warmth. The rain began lightly, then gradually grew heavier, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm. The sound softened the world outside, drawing us deeper into the moment. Jason moved to the couch and gestured for me to join him. There was nothing unusual about it. We'd sat together countless times before, but something about the closeness felt sharper now, more intentional. I sat down and our knees brushed lightly. The contact wasn't charged or uncomfortable, just human. A reminder that connection lived in small details, you know? Said after a pause, I used to think adults had everything under control. Like you all knew exactly what you were doing. That's the big secret of growing up, I said. We're all winging it. You hide it better than most. Maybe I've just had more practice pretending. His gaze softened. Have you been lonely? The question was asked so gently I almost didn't hear it. But the truth slipped out before I could swallow it back. Sometimes I whispered, more than I like to admit. I'm sorry, for what? For not noticing sooner. For not being around. That's not your responsibility, I said. Touched nonetheless. We shifted the conversation to lighter things after that as students. The campus, little stories that made us laugh. But beneath it all was a new layer of understanding, something neither of us needed to name. By evening, the room glowed with the warm amber light of a single lamp. The rain had faded, replaced by the distant hum of passing cars. When Jason asked if I wanted to stay for dinner, I said yes, without hesitation. We cooked together, laughing, teasing, moving around each other in the small kitchen with an ease that felt almost choreographed. Every moment felt genuine, safe, familiar. When he walked me to my car later, the hug he gave me was steady, grounding. The kind of hug that reminds you you're not alone, that someone cares. Can I ask you something next time you visit? He asked quietly. That depends, I teased. He chuckled. Fair enough. As I drove home, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. Nothing inappropriate had happened, nothing even close. But something had shifted. Some small door inside both of us had opened, and I wasn't sure what would come through it next. During the following week, moments from that afternoon drifted through my mind unexpectedly. The way he listened, the way he spoke with such quiet honesty. It wasn't romantic and it wasn't dramatic. It was just deeply human. A kind of connection we rarely allow ourselves to acknowledge. When Saturday arrived, I found myself baking another lemon loaf. Maybe out of habit. Maybe out of hope. Maybe simply because sharing something familiar made the world feel softer. Jason opened the door before I could knock again. His grin was bright, and the warmth in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He had been waiting. "Mary," he said, hugging me with that same steady warmth. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." The apartment felt even cozier this time. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the floor. We settled into the living room with fresh coffee, the quiet comfortable between us. "I've been thinking," he began. "About what?" "About what I asked last time. About life, regret, everything." I inhaled slowly, and it made me realize how little I actually know about your life. Not the version you tell at family gatherings. The real one. The quiet parts. The dreams you shelved. The things you wanted but didn't have space for. There was no judgment in his voice. Only curiosity. Respect. I stared into my coffee for a moment, gathering the threads of memories I rarely touched. "I suppose," I said softly, "there were things I wanted. A family of my own. A partner, stability, but life. It doesn't always